jamming techniques aren't going to work against them at all. And it's heading very fast. To give you kind of an idea, the first use of a fiber optically guided drone, a fog drone in Ukraine was by Russia in late November, early December of last year. And now, a year later, you can buy it on Alibaba. That's how fast it's happening. It's mind-boggling.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 450. How prepared are we really to stop the wrong drone from showing up in the wrong place? To explore that question, we head to Orem, Utah, to speak with Logan Harris, CEO, President, and founder of Spotter Global, a company specializing in compact radar and drone detection technologies. Spotter Global imagines, designs, manufactures, and coordinates the software development of compact surveillance radars. The company was originally founded to meet the needs of U.S. Special Forces, who required a very small, wide-area radar to protect small units conducting village stability operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. From that need, the first compact surveillance radar, the M600, was developed to protect warfighters operating in austere environments. In 2013, the attack on the Metcalf substation in California highlighted the need to detect threats far beyond the fence line. In response, Spotter introduced its first compact security radar, the C40. Since then, the company has expanded its commercial off-the-shelf offerings to include 17 radar models covering areas from 1 acre to more than 380 acres, serving markets well beyond critical infrastructure and far beyond North America. Logan is widely recognized as the inventor of the compact surveillance radar category. With deep expertise in RF engineering and digital signal processing, he launched Spotter RF in 2009 to help prevent harm to critical infrastructure and protect warfighters. Previously, Logan served as CTO at Wavetronics and as CTO and co-founder of EMSAR, the creator of Nano SAR. His engineering background also includes roles at IBM, TRW, Sensar Larson Davis, and Vantage. Logan holds both bachelor's and master's degrees in electrical engineering from Brigham Young University. Known for his innovation and leadership, he has positioned Spotter Global as a trusted radar provider across government and commercial sectors. In this episode of the Drone Radio Show, Logan talks about the growing reality of drone threats, how Spotter Global is using advanced detection to protect critical infrastructure, and what the future of airspace security looks like as agencies, regulations, and technologies evolve. Before we hear from Logan, I want to say that your support is the heartbeat of this podcast. Every episode is created with you in mind, and your generous donations help cover production costs and keep the show going. Whether it's the price of a cup of coffee or a larger contribution, every bit helps. To donate, visit droneradioshow.com/donate. And if you can, please subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform and leave a review. It really helps the show stand out among the thousands of podcasts out there. If you have a great story about how drones are being used, I'd love to hear from you. You can reach me at randy@droneradioshow.com. So let's learn how compact radar systems are being used to mitigate drone threats with Logan Harris of Spotter Global. Let's pick up the interview where I ask Logan to introduce himself.
My name is Logan Harris. I'm the president and CEO of Spotter Global.
Logan, tell us about Spotter Global. What does the company do?
So Spotter does a wide range of perimeter detection sensors, radars, remote drone ID, as well as the software that brings that all together and it connects into existing video management systems, as well as the health and monitoring of enterprise systems. So it's kind of like kind of a full technology stack when you want to know what's around your facility and any potential threats, whether it's over the water, on the ground, or in the air.
Can you give us an overview of your core products?
Yes. So, kind of give you the range of the products. We have 17 different radar models, compact surveillance radars. These are small radars that go from the weigh 1.5 pounds with 150-meter range on a walking person, all the way to our largest model, which is the C1200, that weighs just under 5 pounds, but yet still has a range of about a mile on a walking person. I like to tell people it's 15 million square feet of radar coverage that you can carry in your backpack.
Are these systems designed to be mobile, stationary, or both?
We have both because they're very small and lightweight, portable, low powered. Primarily for the military, we do a lot of mobile kits or mobile systems where it goes out with a small group of soldiers to provide, kind of situational awareness when they're out in dangerous scenarios. But then another big part of our business is for critical infrastructure, things like data centers, airports, electrical utilities, power plants, oil and gas, where these, you've got these very high profile sites, and these will be fixed onto poles in a permanent situation. Same sensors, same radars, same, drone ID sensors, just configured differently.
There are several companies operating in the counter-drone and surveillance space. From your perspective, what truly differentiates Spotter Global from others in the market?
Well, I guess one, we were the first to create this category of compact surveillance radars. When we introduced our first radar in 2010 to the military, there wasn't anything in this class. Before that time, kind of put it in perspective, they had the ground surveillance radars, and these were large, 100-pound systems with range of, 10 kilometers on a person, but very, power hungry, not something that you're going to be sticking in your backpack and jumping out of a plane with. But we had initial pull from the market. Before I started doing that, I was working for another company where we were doing synthetic aperture radar that goes flying on small drones like the Boeing Scan Eagle, and for imaging in a kind of wartime environment. And at that time, they were doing village stability operations. SOCOM was with SEALs, Navy SEALs, and Army Rangers that would be deployed out to these villages on their own, small group, 5 or 6 guys out there on their own, and they needed some way to have wide area situation awareness that they could literally take with them in their backpack. And that's where we came about, was took kind of the radar technology, tweaked it, turned it into something that could be used, very small, lightweight, but used to track, moving targets around this. And that kind of where compact surveillance radar came from. And so, one, back to your say, what differentiates us? One, that's where we came from. We were first into the market. It kind of created this whole new category of radar system and sensor systems. And then as that's progressed, then, we've developed into, counter drone and over water. One of the things that really sets us apart is our technology versus you might have heard of electronically scanned arrays, ESAs, as they're referred to. Our technology is different. It's a volumetric persistent staring radar system, which allows us to get, many snapshots, if it were, kind of from a camera analysis or camera analogy. For instance, we scan the full volume of our field of view of space 8 times a second, which allows us to be then able to track fast-moving targets, which is becoming more and more critical.
Spotter Global's early work was rooted in the military sector. How did you transition into commercial and civilian applications?
So first of all, we had what we call the M600. It was 1,000-meter range radar for the mobile military forces, special forces. At the same time, we were seeing a need for having wide area perimeter security and surveillance for these critical infrastructures sites. And so we developed our first fully commercial non-ITAR radar called the C40. That was the first, what I would say, compact security radar that came onto the market in 2012. And that was then, the adoption of that was driven by an event where there was an attack against a substation in California called Metcalf. And it's one of the critical substations there. It's a large 500 kV substation supplying into the Bay Area. That was attacked by two gunmen a few hundred meters away from the fence line. And within 5 minutes, they had done like $10 to $15 million of damage, took the whole substation offline just by shooting up the transformers. Then, to make matters even more urgent, the Federal Energy Regulation Commission, the FERC, released a report like 6 or 7 months later that said if you take down 9 of these critical substations, of which there's about 400 in the United States, if you take down 9 of these simultaneously across the United States, then the whole grid of the United States will have catastrophic failure and go offline. And if you think about being offline, the whole United States offline, it's going to take a while for that to come back. And that was a really risky business. And then that's when all the electrical utilities started saying, well, we need to know what's going on, not just at our fence, but far beyond. And that drove our adoption into the commercial area.
Let's use a real-world example. If a utility has an isolated transformer or remote asset, how could a drone or drone detection help them monitor and manage that environment?
So there's a couple different ways to approach this. One is the drone as a threat, and then drone as what is sometimes referred to as a first responder, DFR. Your listeners probably have heard of that. Drone as a first responder is a way the drone can act as a security guard. And we do that as well, where we work with other companies. One company we've worked with has a drone that sits on a post or a pole. And then when we detect an event like with our drone ID sensor, where it picks up the operator, then our system cues their system to automatically launch the drone and then go over to examine or go to the operator, see what they're doing, possibly pull a license plate from a car, and then be able to send out guards or the police if it's warranted.
Do your sensors have the ability to distinguish between different types of movement, such as people, vehicles, animals, or drones?
Yeah, so depending on the sensor, we use a couple different technologies. One, with the radar systems, it tracks everything that moves. And then we'll use like radar AI to classify, okay, is this a person, a bird, a vehicle, a deer? And then we'll also then use video AI as well to get dual confirmation to give us lower false alarms. And we'll also use that to say, okay, what it is. That's what we do on the radar side. This other sensor, which uses a technology called remote ID, every drone in the United States that weighs more than 250 grams has to broadcast their ID, its position of the drone, and the position of the operator. And so depending on what type of sensor we're using and what the target is, we'll have that type of information that we can use to then cue the drones onto the potential threat to that facility.
The use cases seem clear and the need appears significant. Are asset owners and operators quickly adopting this technology, or do they still need education and convincing?
Yeah, well, we've been doing this for 16 years now. And by and large, the electrical utilities, say, with these critical substations, they've been mandated by law to roll these out. And they've been doing that for the last, 12 years. So that's been happening and continues to happen. So that's been a major adopter. Of course, military, they're a major adopter of radar. They've been using radar since, prior to World War II. So they definitely understand the the value of a sensor technology that can see through the rain and the fog and that kind of thing. The other kind of market segments that are starting to get, familiar with this technology is then things like data centers and water utilities, and then lately things like helipads, the hospitals that have helicopters, and anything you think you've got low flying aircraft around at, say, local airports. Now they're concerned about drones. There's a lot more drones that are flying in the airspace, and there's potential confliction, and that is then driving the adoption of more of these sensors and solutions to pick up drones that are posing a threat in these different areas.
We still hear about drone incursions over prisons, yet adoption of counter-drone technology seems limited. Do you see this as a funding issue, an awareness issue, or something else?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. Prisons don't have necessarily, they're not really well funded. So depending on which, one it is, having the funds available to roll out a system such as these remote ID type sensors are quite affordable. Radars are more expensive. And then, of course, you have to have the training and management and, support to continue to use those systems. And so it's kind of a gradual process, just like even back in the day when the first, video cameras, CCTV started to come out, it took years and years for that to be adopted. So even though prisons are dealing with drones on a very regular basis, that's one of the areas that, yes, they have drone incursions at a high numbers. I don't have those like specific data that I wish I did that I could refer to, but I do know from what we've seen that, having regular occurrences of drones coming in, dropping, different contraband, that is something that most prisons now have to worry about.
Spotter Global recently rolled out an update to its remote ID solution. What did that update change, and what new capabilities does it provide for law enforcement and security teams today?
Released our version 1.0. Basically, it picks up the Wi-Fi broadcasting drones only. That was at the beginning of the year. Then in September, we released what we call a remote drone ID, or RDID 2.0. So that has the capability to pick up both Wi-Fi and Bluetooth drones. And that's important because, with the Wi-Fi, those are DJI, Autel, Skydio, Parrot, kind of the top leading brands. But then you'll have other drones like Holy Stone and a bunch of other ones that use Bluetooth. Now, those are shorter range, but they could still pose a risk to critical infrastructure. And so that's why that was significant, to be able to support and detect the operators and the drones from both Bluetooth and Wi-Fi.
Over the 4th of July, your system was used to track rogue drones during an event attended by more than 50,000 people. Can you tell us what happened?
That was kind of crazy. So there was a big fireworks show and concert in a large football stadium, and during the fireworks show, there was 4 different drones that came and flew over the stadium while the fireworks show was going on. We shared this information with the local law enforcement, because that's the thing about remote ID is it also identifies where the operator is located and the serial number of the drone. And the local law enforcement were able to get and intercept 2 of the operators of the 4 that flew over that stadium during that event.
In that case, was it primarily people unaware of the rules, or were there more serious concerns?
They did not share with us what they were doing, but that's kind of my assumption. It didn't seem like they were necessarily trying to disrupt it. In fact, no one would have noticed it because they were flying pretty high and in the dark, and with there's noise, you're not going to hear these drones, flying at 100, 120 meters up in the sky, 400 feet up in the sky. You're not really going to notice them much, especially if there's fireworks going on. So my assumption is that they just didn't think that this could be something that could be putting people at risk, but it definitely is. Having a drone up above could put those on the ground at risk. And, there could be other problems, if there was someone with real malicious intent.
Were there any surprises in how the system performed during that event?
Not really surprises in that sense. It is interesting to see how much drone flights there are. Like, that's probably the most surprising thing. I mean, we saw one of these drone flights from the event that I was talking to. The drone operator started over a mile and a half away from the stadium is where they launched from. And they flew it in, and then they went around over the stadium a couple times before they flew back out. So in a sense, I mean, the surprising part was just how far away the operators were from where it was taking place, because according to the regulations that we have in the United States right now, unless you have a special waiver, you're not supposed to be operating out of line of sight. So one, it was the middle of the night. It was like, 10:30 at night, and it was dark. And then people were flying miles away to go take a look at something, which it was kind of surprising that they didn't think that was maybe not a good idea. But the drones are very capable. I mean, they can definitely do it. So that was the surprising part.
What lessons did you take away from that deployment, and how did those insights shape improvements to the system?
One of the things that we did on another one is that we also added capability to queue cameras onto target. So the remote ID, it'll pick up the GPS location and the serial number from which we can get kind of like a make and model, but it doesn't necessarily say if it's carrying a payload. And many of these drones, in fact, there's like a YouTube video saying how you can outfit a DJI Mavic with a payload that you can drop, kind of crazy stuff like that. And so one of the things that we did in future versions, like I did another event at a football game, and in that case, we can cue a camera onto target so we can help identify, okay, is it carrying a payload, to help say, okay, does this particular drone pose more of a threat or not? Or if it's just, has a camera on there, it's going to have less of a threat than if it's carrying some sort of payload that could potentially drop.
Spotter Global has collaborated with Surveillance One as part of a broader defense framework. What role did Spotter play in that ecosystem?
Yeah, so Surveillance One is, it's been in the business for 25 years, putting out layered defense systems and helping companies design their defense architecture, usually multiple technologies. And so what we were able to provide is kind of like a full technology stack or technology backbone that they can incorporate into their systems that they're deploying for both ground, air, and over water, kind of like a multi-domain type protection system. So they also incorporate other technologies. We're not a camera manufacturer, and there's other sensors like things that are, for gunshot detection and things like that we work together with Surveillance One to be able to deploy a full solution that meets the needs of those customers.
It sounds like ecosystem level partnerships could be a major growth area. Do you see this kind of collaboration as the future of counter-drone and security solutions?
Yeah, I mean, it's changing fast. I think that's good for, everybody's benefit, drone pilots, the normal public. In terms of, we need a safe kind of operating environment where drones can be used in a safe manner, but at the same time, protecting these events, this critical infrastructure from the bad actors as well. And so right now, the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, just got passed. And in that, there is additional authorities that are being delegated for drone mitigation to the local law enforcement. That's coming. That was in the bill. So that's a major change in the industry to say that, okay, before there was only 5 federal agencies that had authority to mitigate drones. And now it's saying local law enforcement, tribal, state, and local after proper training and with authorized equipment, can have the authority to mitigate drones in certain circumstances. Things like these events, or critical infrastructure, or where it's endangering lives, like when they're fighting forest fires, and they're flying in, the fire planes that are dropping retardant, and drone comes into the airspace, that puts people's lives at risk. And now local law enforcement is having that authority. So that's starting to drive a lot of now new interest to say, well, now we can do something about it. First, we got to detect them. We got to know that they're there. And then now we can do something about it.
Is current legislation clear about what types of mitigation are legally permitted? Or is that still evolving?
That was left pretty broad. It didn't really say specifically, because there's jammers, there's drones that hit other drones, there's drones that capture drones. Of course, they're shooting it down in different forms. There's nets. So there's lots of different ways. What it did say was that it would have to be federally authorized and approved equipment. So that was kind of the caveat to that. And it also had the local law enforcement and state law enforcement had to be trained. So I'm assuming that that's some sort of certification process. But since this is all pretty new, how that's actually going to play out, we're going to see in the next few months.
It often seems that regulations only become clear after someone crosses a line.
Well, I think a lot of this is driving up to the FIFA World Cup. There's money been allocated, for local law enforcement to purchase counter drone equipment. There was $500 million put together into a grant program. $250 million had to be spent before June. Another $250 million for the next fiscal year 2027, for all local law enforcement across the United States. So it's happening fast.
How do you think large global events like the World Cup will change the way agencies coordinate and work together on airspace security?
Yeah, I think it's going to broaden the kind of like the spread of capability for detecting, tracking, identifying, and responding to drones. In the past, there really hasn't been much awareness. I mean, some local law enforcement started to adopt using drones, as kind of like the first responder to go and surveil, when there's someone running through the backyards trying to escape, or trying to find someone who's lost and things like that, search and rescue. But there really hasn't been much of any coordinated counter drone initiatives until now. And so I see that that's going to, develop across the United States, that capability within local law enforcement to respond to threats that are being caused by drones, whether that's, nuisance drones that are just flying over neighborhoods, peeping Tom type things, or, things of, that are more serious in nature, like, at a forest fire or at an event or at a critical infrastructure. But now local law enforcement is being given the capability, as well as there's being funds, allocated for them to purchase this type of equipment and receive training on it.
These events could significantly expand the capacity of agencies across the U.S. to respond more effectively to drone incursions.
Yes, and by and large, I think that'll be a good thing. I know that there might be some drone pilots, operators that are concerned, privacy concerns or that type of thing. And by and large, the drone operators, the drone community, they obey the law. They don't try to endanger anybody. They're not trying to bother anyone. But there are those bad actors out there that do stupid things and aren't paying attention to, what the regulations are, and no-fly zones and things of that nature. And like case in point, there was a fire here, local, where within a space of about 5 days, they had 23 drone incursions. That puts all the firefighters that are flying in the helicopters and the planes, and plus the people on the ground who then are in danger because that, they can't do the air response when a drone is flying. And so I think, having this type of forum to help, educate everyone to say there's a proper way to use drones. And I think that is just going to continue, even though, they're putting additional restrictions on DJI and other Chinese-made drones, I don't think that's really going to change the future of drone use in the United States, because there are lots of really good and innovative uses of drones that we're going to just see a lot more of it. And then we've got to integrate that into our airspace in such a way that we can get the economic benefit from the use of drone while at the same time protecting assets and people from bad actors.
With so many technologies and vendors involved, are we getting closer to a truly integrated end-to-end counter-drone solution?
We're a ways off from that. For example, there's a system, ADS-B, that's used by passenger aircraft, any type of aircraft really. And that's been around for quite a long time. And still, even yet, many small passenger aircraft don't have ADS-B on them. But on the drone side, with the remote ID, most all drones that were manufactured after September of 2022 has remote ID built into it. But even so, not all manufacturers are implementing the protocol the same way. Drone ID sensors like the ones we've developed, we have to continuously tweak our protocols and how we are able to interpret, because they're all a little bit different. So there's that part. And then there's also the other piece of saying, okay, well, how does this data get shared? And what are the legal ramifications of sharing that data? Like, we can receive this data, we can see the data, we plot the data, but then how's that information shared with helicopters that are doing search and rescue? And there's an industry effort that kind of goes around what we call unmanned traffic management. UTM is kind of the acronym that's used. So there's different efforts that are trying to define those and do that, but it's still very new. I mean, right now we've got a good kind of, even though it's showing signs of strains with the air traffic controllers, but we have kind of like a nationwide system that manages air flights from these passenger planes and others. But at the lower level, with the drones, that hasn't happened yet. So we've got a ways to go before that does.
When it comes to malicious threats, what emerging risks concern you most today?
You just have to watch the war in Ukraine play out to see where the threats are going. And they're coming up with all kinds of innovative types of drones and also ways to use those drones in ways that can be very dangerous. One of the ones in particular is what's called fiber optically guided drones, or FOG drones. And these FOG drones, they have this small, little thin, glass fiber optic cable that's quite strong. Just think of it as like a spider web that comes out the back of the cylinder, that now Russia has launched some that have, 50-kilometer type range. And those drones, they don't have any RF emissions. It's fly-by-wire, but the communication is all happening over that fiber optic cable, that little glass strand. And they can't be detected by RF sensors. Like, they don't have drone ID. They don't have any of that. And the only thing you can really do is either, pick it up with radar, or at very close ranges, you can hear it. So that's one crazy thing about it, is that you can get onto Alibaba, which is basically the Amazon from China, and you can buy one of these kits for outfitting your drone, your FPV drone, with a fiber optic canister for about $100 to $350. The other threat that's really coming is these drones that are fly by video waypoints. So they're using their camera to look at the ground, and then they can identify where they are by saying, okay, I can see this, and they have a map embedded into their processor, and they're using AI to just say, okay, I know where I'm at. Keep going. So they're also just flying autonomously, so they can't be jammed. They're not using GPS, so you can't jam their GPS, which is like most common commercial are using GPS for navigation. They're not using GPS. They're using video AI for navigation, and those can't be jammed either. So really, for those two, you have to have more of a kinetic response of some sort. You got to have a drone that hits the drone, or a drone that captures the drone, or you have to shoot it out of the sky. Those are the threats that are coming, and jamming techniques aren't going to work against them at all. So that's where it's heading, and it's heading very fast. To give you kind of an idea of how fast this has been, the first use of a fiber optically guided drone, a fog drone in Ukraine was by Russia in late November, early December of last year. And now, a year later, you can buy it on Alibaba. That's how fast it's happening. It's mind-boggling.
When working with local governments and police departments, each with different priorities and technical backgrounds, how do you communicate the value of this technology in a way that resonates?
Local law enforcement, state, and other authorities, obviously, they're dealing with all kinds of problems that they got to deal with. And so it is a matter of prioritization. Of course, when something is happening, that's usually when they're going to pay more attention to it. So we try to do things where we'll do demonstrations, prove it out. The drone and counter drone is relatively a new technology. And so many times there's a lot of smoke and mirrors about what really works, what doesn't work. And so what we do is more of kind of like an educational type approach where we share and educate our potential clients and partners like Surveillance One on how it works, put it in real world situations and demonstrate to say, okay, this is how it works against this drone or that drone. So it's proving it in kind of real world circumstances. And then, of course, backing it up with service and support. So going forward, you'll know as the threat changes that you've got a company that's standing behind it to make sure that the technology continues to evolve. Because that's the thing, is this is not standing still. And you're going to say, well, you're going to need software updates. You're going to have, different support for different things. So it's an ongoing type of relationship in terms of continuously to solve these problems.
What's next for Spotter Global? What should we expect to see from the company in 2026?
Well, there's a lot. I'd say, keep your eyes peeled. We've got some cool new technology coming up. We just released one of the things I didn't talk too much about. We released our video AI platform that has basically our software that brings the data feeds from the radars and the drone ID and then cues camera and does identification. So last year we released our what we call the NetworkedIO is the software that brings it all together. This coming month, January, we'll be releasing our Neo 6.1 that has the video AI model for identifying drones and birds. So we're very excited about that one. We're also going to be releasing our enterprise level system monitoring system that has a worldview and ability to examine events across a whole system, hundreds of sites, thousands of sensors. That's also coming up Q1 of next year. And then into Q2, we've got a bunch of other new technologies, both for counter drone, enhancing the capabilities of being able to look for particular threats, both for ground as well as in the air. So new technologies are rolling, and that's part of what we're seeing within our industry as well. Is that the pace of development and the pace of new things coming out is only increasing. So I think that's what you're going to see more from Spotter as well, is an increasing number of technologies, both software and hardware, as well as kind of like the full system coming forward in the new year.
And my final question, Logan, what message would you like to leave our audience about the future of the drone industry?
It's an exciting time, rapidly changing time. I would say that with proper cooperation from the drones and the counter drone industry, that we can provide solutions that will both ensure the security of our infrastructure, of our people, our military, as well as allowing drones to be used in many different and innovative ways. I'm very bullish on the future of drones and the use of drones in terms of their good uses. And at the same time, the counter drone industry is going to be there to help ensure that drones are not used in malicious ways.
That's it for episode 450 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Logan Harris of Spotter Global, and I want to thank Logan for taking the time to speak with me. To learn more about Spotter Global or to connect with Logan, visit spotterglobal.com. If you enjoy the Drone Radio Show, please subscribe, share the podcast, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're able to support the show, you can donate at droneradioshow.com/donate. Thanks for listening. Your support truly means a lot, and I hope you'll tune in to future episodes of the Drone Radio Show to hear how drones are being used for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Goers.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.